Welcome to Managing Love Intelligently. I'm Jason.
I'm Stephen Ng, and the two of us are going to be having a conversation about managing love intelligently. I think if you give it a listen, you're going to like it.
Yeah, I think you will too. And how this works is I'm going to present a topic to Steve, and we're going to chat about it for an hour or so. And today's topic is breakups don't have to hurt so much.
Ooh.
So kind of a long title, but very important. So before we kick off the conversation, if you have a question for Steve, visit stephening.com and fill out the contact form. At the end of each episode, Steve will answer a listener question, so stay tuned for that. And if the podcast helps you live a happier life, please share it with your friends and family.
Yeah, breakups, gosh, all the songs about breakups and everything else. And people are so reluctant to break up, even when there's overwhelming evidence that it's time,
Yeah. Well, I want to say, I have a little thing I wrote. So it's like my last breakup for me, had the D word.
Personal disclosure here.
Yeah. Well, my last breakup devastated me, which is what we don't want to happen, which we'll get into. But not only was I upset about losing my girlfriend, but on top of that, my best friend of 20 years and his girlfriend chose to be friends with my ex over me. So I was completely shattered. I felt
wow, you make it sound so topical, though.
Yeah.
I was completely shattered.
Well, it's been over 2 years now, so thankfully the pain has subsided for the most part. It still sometimes has a sting that rises to the surface, but anyways, after that thing, I felt like a defective, unlovable human. I also felt like I wasn't fun due to my ex telling me to my face one day that I was, in fact, not fun. And rather than get down about all this, which I was very much, I decided to throw myself into a fairly intense healing journey, I would call it. And that involved therapy, dating other people, reading, writing, traveling, plant medicine ceremonies, sound baths, meditation, integration circles, and all sorts of things. It was a whole wide spectrum of things that I did.
I don't even know what half those things mean.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And through this journey, I was able to release the stories that I was a defective and unlovable and not fun human. And at the end of the day, I think I was able to reconnect with my soul. It was quite the journey. And I also saw so clearly why the pain of this breakup and loss of friendship was so immense. And I believe it has to do with something Steve said, which is that breakup pain is determined by how much you compromise your terms and something along those lines. But when I heard that kind of hit me like a bolt of lightning. And I saw how in both my relationships and my friendship, I was compromising so much of myself that it nearly killed me.
Oh, gosh.
Boom.
Now I'm sorry I made all those jokes. Jeez, that sounds horrible.
Yeah.
Seriously, now you're laughing.
It
really does sound horrible.
Yeah, it was rough. It was a rough time. But sometimes we talk about how you need to get hit by a 2x4. I needed to get hit by two of them, two 2x4s.
Well, there's some real truth to that too. And as long as you came out of it, on the other side, and you didn't end up, permanently losing yourself or, committing suicide or something, then it's valuable. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think for me, my history of breaking up is almost nil, because in terms of all the times I've ever fallen in love, let me back up. People who fall in love easily often feel embarrassed or even are made to feel shame by the mockery of others, because somehow it means you don't love sincerely or truly with any depth. I would argue that those of us who fall in love fairly easily have the gift of seeing what is truly lovable about a wide number of people, so that falling in love easily is a sign not of superficiality or superficial love, but a sign of, I think, deep depth of soul, where you can see just how wonderful the mass of humanity is. But then, after falling in love, I found myself, at times seeing it wasn't really going the way that I might have idealized. But I virtually never broke up with anybody until I got much older, never through my teens, never.
So you were always getting broken up with, they broke up with you.
I was always getting dumped. Let's just put it out there. Okay. Yeah.
And were you consciously doing that? Because I have that too, kind of, where I was like, I didn't want to be the dumper was.
Right. I think it was because as a character, there's a lot of me that is pathologically caregiving or caretaking. And I just thought, no, that's my job. I'm supposed to take care of this woman or this girl. And the idea of dumping her, well, that would hurt her feelings. So of course I'm not going to do that. That would be mean. And it didn't occur to me that no, there's a gift in being dumped, in that it sets a person free and you get to go on with your life. And so, what's the alternative? She wants to dump me, but instead she stays with me out of one of two possible choices, either out of guilt because she feels like she made a commitment. So, a promise is a promise and she has to stay, or she stays with me out of pity. And neither alternative is acceptable to me. I don't want anyone to stay with me for either of those two reasons.
Yeah. And in my relationship that I was talking about, she told me, we dated for about 3 years or so. And she said about a year or a year and a half in that she was over it. I think I've said that before.
Yeah.
And then, so I got the taste what that feels like to not be dumped. And it was much more painful. Like, it would have been better to get dumped after the year and a half or the year or whatever it was, rather than.
What was she sticking around for? Was it out of pity for you, or was it just the great sex?
It was not the great sex. It was not that. So it was, yeah, it was.
You're too modest.
No, it was, she did not like having sex with me. It was not good. That part was a relationship that I've never experienced before, where the sex is that hard to have with somebody. And that was another whole journey in itself to get out of that, because it was not I had negative sexuality is how I describe it after that relationship.
On a scale of 1 to 10, it was like -3.
It was like negative, like all whatever. It wasn't even at 0. It was just gone.
All right.
But anyways, I think I think there was a part of her that loved, like, that enjoyed spending time with me, meaning hanging out, talking, and watching TV. That's kind of like,
ouch.
Yeah. That's what I would guess. I don't know. I'd have to ask her. Maybe I could bring her on this podcast and we could
call her. Let's call her right now. For me though, I kept looking at breaking up as the bad thing, the thing I don't want.
Yes. When
actually it's like everything else in a relationship. It can be the very best thing that happened. And the saying that I think you were alluding to earlier that you heard from me was, it was about my pain on breaking up. My pain upon breaking up will be directly proportional to the degree to which I've compromised my terms. Mm-hmm. And for those who don't know what I'm talking about, there was an expression that goes back at least until the 60s and 50s, I think, talking about, Clint Eastwood even said this in a couple of movies, I think, a man's got to live on his own terms, or something like that. And you'd hear people talking like that. And most of us have an intuitive grasp of what that means. But basically, it's about being true to yourself and true to your values and your code of honor, and doing the right thing. Very stoic, philosophically, where I'm going to be who I am and do what is right, regardless of the consequences. So the stoicism, when applied to dating, or to a love affair, it would mean my pain upon breaking up is never going to be of any significance as long as I've lived my life according to my terms. Mm-hmm. Because if she's violating my terms, for example, I've told her that I want an abuse-free life. I've told her that I want to have a relationship based on equality. But nevertheless, she clings to the idea of female privilege. She clings to the freedom to employ the option of getting abusive by yelling or screaming or calling me names or guilt-tripping me. If I don't tolerate that and I decide, I need to move on, then I'm going to feel great. And of course, this is, what's good for the goose is good for the gander kind of a situation, because women, I think, would benefit from having the same worldview, that to really know oneself and to know what principles are inviolate, which principles or values that you don't want to compromise on. There's a lot to compromise on, like, who's going to take out the trash and who would do the cooking, or how would we share other chores, or what will we do about, our finances? Will we share them or have separate bank accounts? We can negotiate and talk about a lot of things. But one thing that's really not too negotiable, I think, is your core values and your sense of self. So, and I deliberately picked a couple that are, really provocative, but I could pick some that are really less universal and more personal, and they would nevertheless be deal breakers. So if I said to, and this actually happened to me in one dating relationship, I found out she was using a very popular drug. And I said, yeah, I'm not comfortable with that. Well, you don't have the right to control me. And I said, you're absolutely right. Mm-hmm. I do, however, have the right to determine who I'm going to be hanging out with, spending time with. Mm. And I can't do that if you're going to be using. And she said, well, I'm not using now. I can see that you're not using, but even when you get into my car and you're holding and it's in your purse or your pocket, that's putting me and my freedom at risk. Because if we get pulled over or there's some kind of a legal problem, I don't really want to be caught up in that.
Yeah.
So,
what'd she say?
At that time in her life, she agreed to not use drugs. But I said, you're certainly free when you're not around me to do whatever you want to do. Mm-hmm. And that was a small negotiation, I think, in my mind, at least. It was relatively small, because I wasn't trying to control her life. I was trying to protect my life. So living life on my own terms, I'm kind of done with the idea that every other person on the planet is more important than I am, and my needs don't matter. No, my needs matter very much, because when I don't take care of myself, then relationships go real south really quickly.
Well, someone's going to be like, well, you're a selfish person then.
Yeah, because I'm really selfish, because I want an adult relationship with another adult rather than an adoption by me as the adult, with her being the dependent. And I talk about these things as if males are the ones who always have that one role, but it's really just about my life, because whether a person is a male or a female, man or a woman, they could adopt the alternate point of view or the alternate role. Mm-hmm. And when we do that, I think, and then we ignore our values and our terms for living life on our own terms, as the saying goes, then we put ourselves at great risk, because every time I compromise my terms, I'm giving up a bit of my identity. And after a period of time, I've given up so much of my identity that I'm fragmented. There's not enough of me left, so that now if she threatens to leave, I become very fearful, because I'm not just alone, I'm in the negatives.
Yeah.
It's not like I got handed back my wonderful life, because that's the secret, right? I want to have a wonderful life so that if she dumps me, then I get my wonderful life back, instead of feeling devastated because she took everything with her.
Yeah.
And when we start compromising our values and we start compromising on our terms, which I would say are two synonymous ways of saying the same thing, so I'm being redundant. When we do that, we're giving up big chunks of our identity, and it makes the breakup exquisitely painful. Oh my gosh. And it was kind of funny, because as I started learning that lesson, I became more willing to walk away from relationships, more willing to break up. And it turns out I have a lot of values that are important to me. And things that really matter to me. So I think if we all could kind of start taking a look at those things, and it's a great tool for diagnosing what's wrong with your current relationship, because for most of us, if we're in an unhappy situation with another person, it's because we've compromised way too much. Yeah. So you break up with somebody where you didn't compromise your terms, you're going to be feeling just fine. You break up with somebody with whom you've compromised a lot of your terms, you're going to be feeling so horrible. Yeah. That's the rule.
That is the rule. And What exactly is going on when you do compromise those terms for yourself? Like you said, you lose, you become fragmented, you say?
Yeah, and you lose your own identity, because your identity is made up of many things, but certainly your values are part of that. What it is you hold to be dear in this world. And so when you start giving that up because you don't want her to leave you, or you don't want to lose her, or you don't want to contemplate life without her for whatever reason, and it always goes back to fear, but fear of what? Fear of being alone, fear of never finding love, etc. Whenever we do that, we end up losing, I think, ultimately her respect. And as I've said before, I don't believe any woman can love a man she no longer respects.
Yeah, that definitely happened in my relationship, I feel like.
Yeah, because we can see, I mean, in sometimes, I don't think it's healthy, but some relationships are characterized by who has the power. And ideally, we want relationships based on equality. I think that's so important. I can't say it enough. But when somebody has control over me or power over me in this way, then there's a built-in inequality. And that's when the respect begins to melt away.
Yeah.
So in my attempt to save the relationship, I've guaranteed the relationship's destruction with all that compromising.
Yeah. And then going back a little bit, how do people even know their terms? How do they come to their terms? How do they figure that stuff out? I mean, this is like something like, I wish I knew I had terms. It's like,
well, I agree. It's like so many things in life, that I wish most of us learn. Let me answer your question. Most of us learn through painful personal experience, trial and error.
Yeah.
We get into a relationship. It's just very painful and awful, but we cling to it until the other person, usually her, rejects us. And at least it seems that way to me as a male, but I'm sure there are women out there who have the different perspective. And then over time, we realize, okay, I really can't have drugs in my home, or I must have an abuse-free relationship.
Yeah. Or
I don't care what her religion is. I just want to have religious tolerance be a part of my future. And if we learn that way, that's so much better than nothing. But fantasy-wise, I really think that, again, people are going to be so tired of my saying this. I think if we could have a holistic sex education, I think your terms would be part of understanding who you are, so you could engage in a more intelligent mate selection. And a lot of people really don't know how to do that. Churches do a pretty good job of brainwashing people into thinking you never should marry outside your faith. But I think that's an utterly unhelpful bit of guidance there.
Yeah.
And the other thing they're really big on is no sex prior to, holy matrimony. And again, I don't think that's such a helpful thing, but they both serve as useful red herrings, distracting the attention so that you kind of strain at a gnat but swallow a camel, as Jesus said, in that you put up with a lot of other crap, but thank God you didn't have sex before you got married, or thank God you both go to the same church, which, really great sex for most of us heteros is based on the idea that our genitals will be different from our partner's genitals, right? And so it's the differences, not the similarities, that make it all magical. And in the same way, I think learning to be truly tolerant of people in their faith journeys, their intellectual growth, being able to understand that, when it comes to being in a loving, supportive, true partnership of kindred souls and minds, I could be with a Buddhist woman, or a woman who had no faith at all, or a woman from any other faith on earth. It would just depend on how she herself is walking that faith out.
But someone could have a term that their terms are, I don't want someone outside of my faith.
Their terms are, I mean, at least that's the way most religions would have it, whether it's Judaism, all the Abrahamic faiths are like that.
But a guy could be like, well, he could think that's his term, but that could be kind of an irrational term then. Does that become
in my language, I would say really unhelpful and distracting from the real issues, because in my counseling practice, I've met so many people who had the same religion who were deeply unhappy with each other. And I've never met anybody who was of a different faith where they had tolerance and understood that faith is an intensely personal thing, and where faith was their problem in their relationship.
But you could see how a guy could be like, well, I'm Christian. It's my term, and I want a Christian woman. What's wrong with that, Steve? This is my term. But you're kind of saying, it sounds like, don't make religion one of your terms.
I advise against it, but people are free to adopt whatever terms they think they have.
Okay.
But then I have observed that over time, life has a way of teaching us, not so much. That what you thought was such a valuable boundary in your life, I'm not going to date anyone who's not a member of my church. Well, that turns out to not be so helpful. Or maybe the stopgap, after a divorce or two, people say, well, I still want to marry somebody of my church, but now they have all these other terms. I don't want to be with somebody who has a drinking problem, or I don't want to be with somebody who's not kind. Being with an unkind person would be unacceptable to me. So kindness is one of my terms. And if I can't have that, then I'd rather not have the relationship, no matter how good the sex is.
Yeah.
I don't care what you said, Susan. I'm still not going to reject you.
But in terms of, I guess, from managing love intelligently, I think like a short list of terms, maybe not all of them. One would be drugs and alcohol. That would be like more like universal. I'm just trying to just like a short list of universal terms that aren't confined, that doesn't mean you have to subscribe to them, but just like if you want a relationship where you're managing love intelligently, that would be on the list.
Yeah. So if I were talking about this from that angle and using that language, I would say we all are limited, right? In our capacity to love. None of us are infinitely loving like we imagine the deity would be. If God Almighty were real, then, we are told that he loves everyone on the planet, none of us are that loving. And none of us are capable of being that loving right now. We might be that loving years into our spiritual journey, but that's not what we want in our marriages or in our home life, is to marry the most difficult person on the planet to show just how loving we are. And so for me, there are universal deal breakers and terms that I think everyone would be well advised to embrace. And there are personal deal breakers. Now, I know a lot of people who are smokers and non-smokers alike who couldn't care less whether they lived with a smoker. But for me, that would be a personal deal breaker, because I really am irritated and annoyed with sharing a space with a smoker. So for me, that would be unacceptable. And it is one of my terms, but it's something that, I could see maybe I don't even find out over time. A universal deal breaker would be something that, in the presence of which no one would ever be able to have a successful, intimate relationship. And that would include all forms of substance abuse. And I say abuse, not use. So if I'm a teetotaler and my spouse or girlfriend drinks occasionally, that's what in modern psychotherapy we would call use. Or if someone uses drugs in an intentional, growthful sort of way, like the various users of ayahuasca often do, and sometimes people do with mushrooms as well, psilocybin mushrooms, I could see how those could be very growthful experiences, but casual and regular drunkenness, that's what I'm talking about. Because when somebody's intoxicated, they're really not in the same universe that you are. So they can be drunk next to you and sitting on your lap, or they could be drunk with you, but the two of you are really not together when you're drunk.
And that, you said, blocks they can't form intimacy.
Right, because if you think about how many successful intimate couples we all know across America, not that many. There are very few marriages I would like to have the same kind of marriage in my life. And then you think about how impaired a drunk is driving across town in a car, which is more difficult, driving across town or having a successful intimate relationship. Oh, yeah, I could see how being impaired by alcohol on a regular basis or any other drug could lead to chronic failure in terms of trying to really connect with another person.
But what about people who use that to connect? Like, there's people who I know that they're in relationships and they like to party.
Yeah.
And then that's that's how they unwind from the week, and they go out, they drink, they party, they get drunk.
Yeah. And I would say that's illusory because they're not using it to connect. They're using it to lower inhibitions. A little bit like the shy man at the bar who has a couple of drinks in him. When he goes up and talks to the girl he thinks is too pretty, too pretty for him, that is. And so now he's got his inhibitions are lowered and he can go up and talk to her. And it looks like he's connecting. Maybe she thinks that he's connecting, but really it's all alcohol based. And that's not connecting. He's not even there, as a matter of fact, because when he's fully present, there are problems for him to really connect with her.
But what if you connect Monday through Friday or Monday through Thursday without alcohol, but then
and you do well at it and you're happy
and you do okay,
and the two of you like to recreate by getting hammered on Friday nights? Yeah. Well, you're not together then on Friday nights. I mean, if I'm getting hammered and you're pouring me into the cab at the end of the evening, I'm not really with anybody, am I? I mean, I might be like draped over her. She might have some of my throw up in her hair, but it's not really together. And anybody who's sober has experienced that when you're with somebody who's drunk. They're not really with you when they're drunk. Yeah. And that's why we even have laws, like at least in my state, we have laws that if you knew or should have known the other person was intoxicated, then there is no such thing as informed consent at that point. It is sexual assault. So really, how close and intimate can we really be when the sex we had Monday through Thursday is now a felony on Friday? Yeah. So I think that's inherently a problem, but those are not the only universal deal breakers. I think there's a few more, like, and you could say alcoholism or alcohol abuse falls under the category of untreated mental illnesses, but someone might be bipolar or have some other mental health problem like chronic anxiety or personality disorder. And if you see that and they're not getting help and you've confronted them about it, that's really, I think, one of those terms that, unless you love inviting the crazy into your life and you just really want to have chaos because you thrive on that, well, that means you need to go to a mental health professional as well.
And people do that a lot, it seems like, where they do find the crazy to be comfortable and the comfortable to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's so exciting, right? And I get that, but it doesn't seem to wear very well. It can be a wonderful weekend with somebody who's really crazy, but over a 10-year period of time, it becomes very tiresome because it's so utterly boring and predictable and so disabling. And, part of the whole idea behind partnering with another human being is that they're going to have my back and I'm going to have their back. And if I'm impaired on a regular basis, I don't have anybody's back at that time.
Yeah.
So I hope that makes sense to everybody listening to this. And when we're talking about having someone's back, sort of implied in the idea of our terms is the idea that when we're at home together or when we're together in a relationship, that you're not going to attack me. I won't be getting stabbed in the back, literally. I won't be being attacked verbally. You're a horrible human being. You're boring. You have no sense of humor. I hate you. I wish you were dead. Don't leave me. That's mental illness plus abuse.
Yeah.
And that's just awful. So,
and what about people who stay in that then?
Well, again, I wish we were all talking about this in like a high school setting where it's about sex education, because again, although we wouldn't want to judge someone morally for a mental disability, would any of us go so far as to say, gosh darn it, that sounds like the girl for me?
Yeah.
No, we wouldn't.
Is that like the savior complex kind of like?
Well, sometimes we want to save them, but sometimes we have matching wounds, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so our psychopathologies just kind of fit together like two halves of a zipper.
Is that what they call trauma bond?
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, that would make sense. And then the alcohol, sometimes if there's an ongoing substance abuse problem like alcohol abuse, the alcohol is sort of the zipper, the pull on the zipper, pulling us together. And as long as we keep the alcohol flowing, boy, this is a pretty cool relationship.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about somebody like the borderline personality disordered individual who's terrified of abandonment and feels empty all the time on the inside, and the abusive narcissist who is, it's all about him and his reputation, or her and her reputation, and the narcissist is constantly threatening to leave them, and so the borderline stays in the relationship because the pathology just matches, and he likes it because he's in control and he's dominant, and that fits his image of himself that he wishes to convey to the world. So I think, for all of us, the universal deal breakers kind of make sense. Untreated mental illness, the presence of physical or emotional abuse, substance abuse, chronic substance abuse deserves its own special category, I think, even though you could put it under substance abuse. And then there are other big deals like, oh, they're an adult on the outside, but not an adult on the inside. And so, that becomes part of my needed due diligence when I perform that in the form of an intentional interview. I want to find out, hey, does she have the ability to take care of herself? Is she a human being with some goals? What's she all about anyway? And really taking the time and the pleasure to really get to know another human being. So when we talk about our terms, mostly what you and I are talking about is the kind of terms that would make us say, upon their making themselves manifest, we would say, no, no, thank you. And then there are other things that are a little more intriguing, perhaps, like we find out, oh, she likes this for sports or recreation. We never thought of doing that, nor do we wish to share that with her. But could we imagine a relationship going forward where she pursues her interest in that hobby or that sport, and I pursue my interests in sports and hobbies that don't interest her? And if we can accommodate each other, then I don't see any reason why that would need to be a deal breaker.
Yeah. What about like sex? As far as terms go, like, because you have the whole magic sex number thing.
Yes.
And that would be a term.
For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, it's going to take 10 minutes out of your life to watch my TEDx talk, Magic Sex Number. But if you go to my YouTube channel, Stephen Ng, just enter Stephen Ng and you'll find it. We're talking about sexual compatibility in terms of frequency of sexual engagements or encounters with your partner. So if I meet the perfect woman, perfect in every way, and her idea of a perfect sex life is once a day, and my idea of a perfect sex life is once every other month, that's going to be a deal breaker. Yeah. So deal breakers, kind of that concept of deal breakers, just simply means that it's really not tenable. It's not, we just can't go forward in any sort of a sustainable way. Whereas living life according to my terms are more about my values. Now they intersect. See, one of my magic sex number isn't a value, but it intersects with my values when I think of, do I matter, and do my feelings matter? Do my needs matter? So yes, they do. So I'm going to say to the girl who likes to have sex every day, I'm really not the right partner for you. This isn't going to work for us.
Yeah.
And then
she's like, oh, but I'll compromise.
Yeah. We could have sex once a month and then, twice as much as I want and 1/30th of the amount she wants, and it'll be beautiful. And we're often tempted, right? Because we get emotionally needy and we've fallen in love and we're attracted so much to this person. And we BS ourselves. We go into some sort of a denial. Sure, I could do that. And I've actually had so many women look at me when I share my terms or my values or even my deal breakers, and they respond by saying, well, I think I could do that, which is really, you can watch them kidding themselves.
Yeah.
They just got done telling you the opposite. And then when they find out where I am, they're so needy that they're willing to deny themselves and pick up their cross, so to speak, and just be miserably crucified as they try to have a relationship with me.
Yeah. And that we know because we're talking about breakups and how you do that, or you said the pain is comparable to how much you give yourself up. So it's like, it's almost if they do
how much you compromise. And we've all been taught compromise is essential. I think compromise is essential when it comes to splitting the chores in a fair and equitable way, or talking about how we're going to spend the money on the kids. I think we can do a lot of compromising, but when it comes to who you are, your essence, your values, your identity, I don't think we can do a lot of compromising on that.
And if she compromises that sexual compatibility at not even before the relationship's even begun, that's going to be a disaster, right?
Right. Well, we get so needy, and it's such a human thing to do, right? And both men and women, we try so hard to be what we think the other person wants us to be.
Yeah.
Because we'd rather have a relationship that's flawed than no relationship at all. And that's because we really don't have much of a life. So the challenge, I think, before even getting into a relationship is I need to develop my own personal life so that I have a truly happy life. I feel fulfilled as an adult. I have my own friends. I have my career that I'm developing. And I'm not saying you got to wait till you finish medical school, buddy, before you can ever date anybody. I'm saying that, date as much as you want, fall in love as much as you all want, break a few hearts here and there, get your heart broken, have sex and enjoy yourselves. But I would strongly urge everybody to avoid committed relationships, even the kind of, like just merely living together, anything where you'd have to break up until you've figured out how to have a successful adult life on your own. Because it's really going to change. It's going to really change who you choose to be with and share your life with. I think it was Sam Keen. Forgive me if I don't get this right, listener, but I think it was Sam Keen who said that men have two questions they have to answer in order to be successful. The first is, where am I going? The second is, who am I going with? The problem, he goes on to say, with American men is they answer those two questions in exactly the opposite order.
Yeah.
So figuring out where I'm going with my life, how I want to live it, I think is a burden on both men and women. And I think we both get those two questions that he mentioned in exactly the opposite order because of our emotional neediness. And instead of giving into that neediness, I would say, go ahead and fall in love, go ahead and date, just protect yourself. And using protection for me means something more about thinking than about condoms, but use condoms too. And so protect yourself by really thinking this through, because if you're not really at a state of adulthood where you're at least, looking at your life and saying, I'm pretty much 80% at least where I think I need to be, then you shouldn't be making any kind of a adult commitment like that.
Great. And I have more terms for you.
Okay.
In terms of managing love intelligently, I would say conflict resolution, the ability to have conflict. What about that?
Yeah. I mean, gosh, if I'm with a wonderful woman who's perfect in every way, except she hates arguing and will never bring up anything she's upset about, and she refuses to argue with me, even though I know she feels different from me on a given issue, That's unacceptable. That would be a term that I wouldn't accept being broken, because I know this is going to shock everyone, including my ex-wife. I'm not always right. So part of having my back for my wife means being courageous enough to confront me when she thinks I'm wrong. But at the same time, being committed to an abuse-free relationship where she confronts me in a way that is honorable and not demeaning to me, so that we can have a civil argument. And I've had clients look at me and say, that isn't even an argument. What are you talking about? That's because they've so normalized the law of the jungle, where might makes right, that they think that's the only kind of argument humans can have.
So it's only an argument when I'm talking like this.
Yeah. It's only an argument when somebody's yelling or screaming or calling names or getting verbally abusive or even physically abusive and throwing things. But no, I think you can have an argument the way a board of directors might have an argument about how our corporation can make more money this year. And I think it's a heartfelt argument where two business partners can argue about what kind of money they're going to be spending on advertising this year for their business. And the argument can be heartfelt, it can be sincere, it can be backed up with good arguments or even bad arguments. But the process is so helpful, because it makes us, in the end, smarter and more successful. And if we don't solve those problems, then they just continue to linger. So I think honestly, I'm really grateful today you brought that up, because that is a great addition to my list of my terms. Is I need a scrapper.
Yeah.
She's got to be, I don't want her to be terrified of me. That's one reason why I think a relationship based on equality, where, we truly have an abuse-free dynamic between us, I think it makes it so much safer for everybody to argue.
Yeah. I would also, or do you have more?
No. I mean, I could talk forever. But
I was going to say another one, intimacy. I would just add in there too, like depending on like making sure that the partner, or not making sure, but I guess checking to see whether or not the person understands what intimacy is, because I feel like it's such an important thing in a long-term monogamous committed relationship, because I feel like that is what sustains the relationship. And if the person doesn't know what intimacy is and how to
well, you mean sex, right? Just intercourse?
No, Steve, I don't. Not from those. There was an old show in the 1950s, and the judge would be like, "Were you intimate with this man?" It's like, no, I mean intimacy as in
safely sharing your life
with someone. And like, and really quick, in conflict, when you do those things we talk about, where you are able to resolve conflict and you do problem solve together in an abuse-free way, that also builds intimacy. But it's like, right, that adds to it. So the relationship, in order to sustain, in order to continue to evolve, it needs this intimacy, but it needs to be done in the way that you talk about it.
Well,
it's the safety that you're completely giving yourself over to, and both people are, and it just becomes better and better and better.
As long as you're going to quote me, I have to agree with you. But I think the list is growing, and now you've kind of prompted my own thoughts, because I never used to have some of my terms clearly defined in my life. And one is loyalty. And for me, that was just a virtue that we never talked about in my family. But I know that my own mother lived by that, and she embodied that. It just never really clicked for me that I should be looking for that in a partner. And another one that I know now, and I didn't understand then when I was more of a codependent, is I need a partner who's absolutely crazy about me, head over heels in love, wants to be the president of my fan club, and will arm wrestle anyone else who's competing for that.
Yeah.
So, because I have that kind of love to give, and I've been accused of being so narcissistic that I really want somebody to love me that way. But I have that kind of love to give, and I do give that to my spouse, and she gives the same kind of love to me. And I will tell you, for anybody who has thought about experiencing that but hasn't actually done so, it's awesome. It's really great. It's part of what makes monogamy not become monotonous. It's part of what makes monogamy so utterly delicious. and wonderful all the time. To have somebody who's just crazy about you in your relationship, as opposed to someone who's playing it cool and could take you or leave you, or somebody who really doesn't, who makes it clear she's not all that into you. I've seen marriages like that too, because it's, for them, love is about power.
Yeah.
And they don't want to give away too much love because, for fear his head will swell and he'll think he's all that. But I think all of us benefit from knowing our partner is absolutely crazy about us and thinks we're wonderful. And that doesn't take away from the millions of women who find me quite unacceptable or quite forgettable. They certainly have that right as well. But that's not what I'm looking to share my life with. And I think for me, that would be, having experienced both, that's now one of my terms. I'd rather, frankly, and I've said this before, and I think everybody out there knows what I'm talking about, if you're with somebody who's only sort of into you or maybe ambivalent about you, could take you or leave you, then wouldn't it be less lonely just to be by yourself and still have the option of dating and perhaps finding that person? I myself would rather live alone than be with someone like that, where I have to give up my privacy and my options and my freedom to do what I want to do as a single man, in exchange for a woman simply living in my home who's just not that into me. That wouldn't be really a happy place for any of us.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of suspicious of you now, Jason. I'm kind of wondering how many more terms are you going to come up with? Because these are all good. These are all good.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and think about it some more, but that's what I'll leave the listener with those for now.
I think those, to me, those are universal ones, but
yeah, I agree.
They seem universal to me. No, but even though I know there are many millions, if not billions, of people around the planet who in different cultures have arranged marriages, and the person they're with may not be that crazy about them, but somehow they have a relationship that they think works. I don't know if it really works for anyone or if they're just, making the best of what life has offered them. But it certainly doesn't work for the vast majority of men and women in the West.
Yeah. And if you then do have these terms and you get clear on what your terms are and you don't compromise them and you go and you date, and breakups then don't have to hurt this much.
They're effortless. They're really effortless.
Because it's not,
they don't
personal.
hurt at all. I mean, if you're not compromising any of your terms, then it's like, oh, what a relief. I don't have to be with a woman who doesn't like me. Oh, what a relief. I'm not going to be sexually incompatible with somebody for the rest of my life. Oh, what a relief. I'm not going to be married to a drunk for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
These are not harsh terms. These are really about your boundaries as a human animal, what you need in order to be content and feel safe and comfortable and blissful. So these are all good things that we don't really need to feel like we're somehow the relationship police and we just, issued a citation and she needs to get off the field.
Yeah. Well, if that's the case, then I think the music industry is going to be very upset with you.
Why is that?
Because all the breakup songs. It's like everyone, it was a whole life, which is kind of interesting to think of that because that's in our conscious. Breakups, they're hard. I want her back or I want him back. And it's just that whole, they're just circling around and swimming in this pain of breakups when it doesn't have to hurt that much. And it's like, so now a breakup song for people who listen to this may never be the same because it's like, she compromised my terms. It's over. Next girl. Yeah.
Next. So I was listening years ago to a country song sung by a woman, and those listening who know their country music better than I do will remember it. She was singing about a breakup. And in the music video, she's taking I think it's a sledgehammer, to his car and destroying his property. And I think it's because she found that he was two-timing her and with another woman. I would say the gift there is, you found out that he's really not that into you. He doesn't treasure you. He doesn't value you in that way. And whether the individual is a man or a woman is irrelevant. Just finding out about one of these deal breakers, including something like that, an affair, it's a gift. It's really okay to find that out. The universe is looking out for you if you can accept it that way.
That's where your Buddhist teachings come in, and your more like spiritual side.
For the record, I'm not a Buddhist.
He's not a Buddhist. He's not into religion, but he has a lot of some of these things really. You know, they're the same thing. And it's true to look at the good and bad and like getting even away from labeling things like good and bad and just accepting life as it is and being completely present with it and taking it on as a gift and growing from it. But rather than letting your emotions drive you.
Rather than resisting reality, it is what it is. Let's just accept it for what it is. And for me, it's really a gift. And I want to go forward with this idea, just to push it a little tiny bit more. That even when I go on a first date or a 10th date for that matter, and I'm conducting part of, I'm enjoying our company and we're having some fun together, getting to know each other. And in my work at driving the intentional interview forward, there's just unending joy in getting to know another human being, regardless of whether they're going to ultimately be my partner or not. It's fun to get to know people. It's rewarding and satisfying at a very deep level to understand another human being and where they're coming from and why they are the way they are, how they became the way they are. And so even if in that intentional interview, I discover a deal breaker or what we would call something that violates my terms, I think that doesn't detract from the joy of getting to know this person.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, if you think about it, I think if presented properly, it doesn't detract from her joy of getting to know you whether it's a first date or a 10th date and you're really thinking, oh, this could be something serious, for her to find out that you really violate one of her terms or that you are so not the right guy for her.
Yeah.
But you're smiling and you're enjoying her and it's fun talking to her and you're holding her in mind because you have friends that someday might be the right partner for her. That's a loving, wonderful experience.
Yeah.
And I wish all dating could be like that for us.
Well, I'd also add really quick, I think to have that level of dating, you need to be your authentic self. You need to not be needy and you need to know your terms.
Well, there's the mic drop right there.
Yeah.
I can't say it better than that.
Great. That's what I was trying to get, the mic drop. I wanted it this week. So, all right, to wrap up,
we have still single, ladies.
Still single. I'm still out there. Just enjoying it all. And I am. To wrap up, we have a listener question. If you have a question for Steve, visit stevening.com and fill out the contact form. This week's question is, all right, it's a little long, but here we go. Hi, Steve. My adult son converted to his girlfriend's religion. He went on to marry in her church, and they now have a baby. He has cut me out of his life because my partner, who is a good man who helped me raise him, and I are not married. I told my son that our so-called living in sin, in quotes, is a ridiculous old-fashioned concept from the dark ages. That was a mistake because he felt I was belittling his beliefs and it made everything worse. My partner says it's ridiculous to get married to please them because there is no guarantee that it would change anything. I have yet to meet my granddaughter and I'm heartbroken. I'm writing to you because you have a lot to say about religion and sexuality, and I would appreciate any advice you have to deal with this impasse. Heartbroken mom.
Ooh. So that scenario that you just read, in my experience, it's all too familiar because I see a lot of middle-aged people going through that with their adult children who decide to get married and embrace a new religion. And in embracing the new religion, especially the religion started by someone as loving as Christ, it's sort of odd that they end up being controlling, rejecting, and critical. instead of, more like Christ. But that is his choice as an adult, right? He gets to be whoever he wants to be at a given point in his life. And for the mother looking for some advice here, I think the first step, and I say this as a non-Buddhist but a Stoic, is accepting reality, life on life's terms. This is who he is right now. It doesn't mean this is who he'll always be, or that he'll never come to his senses. He'll never realize you're the mother who nursed him, gave birth to him, raised him, that his stepfather is the man who put raising this child ahead of his own agenda and poured out his support on that boy as he was growing up. For him to realize all of that, that's another part of a future journey, one that he hasn't yet made. And so accepting him in a loving way and then moving on, I think that's really important. By moving on, I don't mean utterly letting go of him or anything like that. You still get to be loving. You still get to send him little loving reminders of your existence, like a birthday card, or even a financial gift, or even a gift in the mail, something more three-dimensional than just a check. But to accept that for today, he does not love the mom he has. He loves some future version of his mom who does not exist. The mom who already embraced the same religion he's embraced, goes to the same church he's gone to, and has done the right thing, quotes around that, in getting married. That's a young person being very controlling, and to just accept that instead of being a god like he might have been when he was a little boy, he has now seen your feet of clay, and he's judged you without mercy, and that's okay, because before you had a son, you had a life, and you get your wonderful life back, and you get to live it and go forward living your best life. In the meantime, he has what will be a very interesting journey ahead of him, and who knows what's going to happen there. But taking care of yourself is an adult's first job. When we have children, the whole definition of a child is someone who needs adult care. But adult is the opposite. Hopefully, by the time we've reared our children, they are capable of making their own decisions, and we wish they made great decisions. But even if they don't, it's their life. So that's all we can do. And then, if you really want to inspire someone else, there's no amount of wheedling or cajoling or guilt tripping that, can get somebody to change. But you could model the very life that you wish he would live. And you could be modeling a very loving, wonderful life with you and your partner. You could be adopting dogs from the shelter. You could be giving to charities of your choice, even volunteering in the community. You could surround yourself with wonderful, kind, loving friends. You can do a lot of things to build what I would call something different from the nuclear family, would be a family of choice. And we, just as the word implies, we can build a family of choice. We have options about who we want to fill in our life with. And I think that when you have that, as painful and bittersweet as it might be to let go of your child, you have all of these other wonderful blessings in your life, and you can go forward having a great life. I know it sounds hard to believe, but this whole idea of children losing the natural affection for their parents, it's even part of the Bible, that in the end times that's going to happen. And if you can just kind of accept, whether you're a believer or not, that, well, this is part of the natural course of things. I mean, this is preordained by the universe. It is what it is. And you are far from the only one who's going through this. Tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of alienated young adults are turning their backs on their parents who love them and care for them. So good luck with this.
Great. Well, thank you for answering that. Thank you for the question. And thank you all for listening. And we'll see you all next week.